Hello and welcome to Ask GCN. It's that video where each week we answer your questions about cycling. And if you want to ask some for next week, just stick them in the comment section below this one or submit them on social media using the hashtag TalkBack or a new one, which is Ask GCN Training. But we'll come on to that in just one moment because without further ado, we should probably answer some questions. First up, we've got this one from Pegasus. And they've asked, if somebody with a functional threshold power of 400 watts, so that's the maximum power they can sustain for an hour, puts out 300 watts, does it feel the same as me putting out 300 watts when I've got an FTP of 310 watts? Or do they feel the same level of discomfort, they can just hold it for longer? Complicated question, very simple answer. If you've got an FTP of 400 watts, then 300 watts feels comparatively easy. Whereas I imagine for you, it's close to your threshold, therefore it's hard. And the reason is because the FTP is effectively a measure of your effort. So when you can do something for just 1 hour, it means that at a lower power, you can obviously do it for much, much longer, which means it doesn't hurt quite so much. So unfortunately, if you go riding with a pro cyclist, then yes, you at threshold is going to be quite easy for them. But you can console yourself with the fact that an FTP of 310 watts is pretty darn good. So congratulations for that. Good work. Right, moving swiftly on. Muzzer 007. Which is faster, turning a bigger gear at a lower wattage or spinning a lower gear at a higher wattage? Well, firstly, to answer your question is actually quite simple because you're saying wattage there. A wattage, or your wattage, is always a measure of power output, okay? And so higher wattage means higher power, and therefore you will always go faster when you're putting out more power. But I suspect from your question that what you mean is actually about force. So if the way you calculate power on a bike is by force times velocity, talking about the velocity of your cranks. So if you pedal slower, then you're putting out less velocity, so you have to put out more force in order to produce the same power, okay? So in that case, actually, it's down to the individual as to whether it's better to pedal slower with a higher force or pedal faster with a lower force, which is probably a very complicated answer. So I'm gonna hand over now to a video that we produced with Professor Louis Passfield where we went in deep on this subject, and you can get through to it just by clicking on screen.
The other thing is that FTP, as you've said, is a reference point of 1 hour's performance. Now, if you're interested in preparing for an effort or an event that's less than that, or significantly longer than that, then your physiology could shift quite dramatically in those different regions of your performance.
Okay, we are on to our training segment now. This is where we're in partnership with our mates over at Zwift. If we choose your question to answer, then you get 3 months free Zwift subscription, which is super cool, isn't it? In order to submit a question, you actually use the hashtag Ask GCN Training. So a little bit different to TalkBack, but there we go. It's not complicated, is it? Now, the lucky person this week is Helicase21, and they have asked a really good question, actually. So they say they keep getting dropped on the local fast group ride when people put in surges. So they've asked for some sessions they can do to work on their 3 to 5 minute power and then their ability to recover from those kind of efforts. But you see, when I read that question, I thought back to my racing days where I knew I was really fit, but actually I struggled sometimes to convert that fitness onto really fast races on the flat. And so I looked at that and went, well, you know what I'd do? I'd try and do specific work to actually help with the surging. So I found that I was able to put out much more power on a climb than I was on the flat. And so if I was you, I would also work at doing exactly that. So trying to produce higher power on the flat. And actually the training for that is to do precisely that. And you don't need to be on the flat, you can do it on your turbo trainer as well. You can make the most of your 3 months free Zwift actually, and do maybe some racing on the flatter circuits. That would definitely help, just so that you get used to putting out really high power, but whilst your bike's moving really, really quickly. But then we also put this question to the head coach over at Zwift, and they made 2 very, very good points actually. Firstly, in that your ability to surge on the bike will be helped by actually having a higher overall fitness, for the principal reason that in the parts of the ride between surges, it's going to feel a lot easier, and therefore you're not going to be using as much of your body's precious stores of glycogen, which is what you rely on when you surge. So not only will you be able to follow the surges at the beginning of the ride, you'll also be able to follow them later on. So definitely work on boosting your FTP, but when you're training, that's kind of what you do all the time anyway, I would hope. But then they also had a suggestion for helping to boost that 3 to 5 minute power, so your maximal aerobic power. And they suggested a really good one, which is a Zwift workout called lactate shuttling. And the idea is that you get some lactate in your legs, so your legs are feeling pretty stingy, and then you keep doing sustained intervals. And so you get your body used to actually working hard when you've already got lactate in the legs, and then also helping your body to get rid of that lactate as well more quickly in between. So you basically be able to boost your power and then get used to those repeated efforts. So hopefully, a combination of all three will get you not only responding to those surges, but also making them yourself. You can be the boss of the group ride. Next question is from Mateus Barbosa. Now he says he doesn't have a power meter yet, and he doesn't like training with heart rate, so he uses speed to pace himself. But what are the disadvantages of this? Well, firstly, speed is a really, really good way of pacing yourself and also measuring your improvements in training. But it does have disadvantages, you're right. And firstly, that it can be influenced by things other than your own performance. So most obviously, it'd be the wind. Your speed on a day when you've got a headwind as opposed to a tailwind will be vastly different, even if your effort is the same. But then even things like the surface of the road. So you'll go slower on bumpy roads compared to smooth roads. So that would be the disadvantage, but you can always work around that, either by taking note of the conditions, headwind versus tailwind, or actually doing your fitness tests, if that's what you're into, on climbs, basically. Still open to influence from wind, but much less so. So anyway, there you go. Do it on climbs. Right, next up we've got Rasmus Weimann. He is about to build himself a much lighter bike. Much lighter, in fact. He reckons it's going to be about half the weight of his current steel bike with mudguards and rack and so forth. His question is about gearing. So, should he stay with the same gearing, or would the lower weight means he doesn't need such low gears anymore? Or is the gear range just about how much power he can put out anyway? Gear ratios. Big topic, very geeky, absolutely love it. But in essence, you could well find actually that your lighter bike will mean that you don't need as lower gears. So you should probably have maybe a smaller cassette on the back or larger chainrings up front. That's a definite thing. But of course, it does just depend on how much power you're putting out. So it's completely individual. And it is, as you say, also about where you live as well. So if you have big mountains that you ride up, you're going to need lower gears than if you live somewhere that's completely flat. So given that it's such a big topic, I'm going to suggest that you watch this video that's going on behind me as well, which is where we go into gear ratios in a little bit more depth and about how you should choose the appropriate ones for where you live.
If we take a 50-tooth chainring and combine it with an 11-tooth on the back, we're going to be travelling forward 9.6 metres for one complete revolution of the pedals on a normal size road wheel. If we go to the other extreme, take a 34-tooth small front chainring and combine that with a 25-tooth on the back, we're going to travel 2.9 metres for the same size wheel. So that's less than a third of the amount.
Okay, quick fire questions now, or at least I'm going to try and be quick, although generally it takes ages, doesn't it? But here we go. First up, Joe Blackburn. It's common for us to describe how new bikes or equipment are reported to give a specific number of watts saved, but I wondered if you could explain this, what it's in comparison to. That's a really good point, actually. Manufacturers will often say this saves 4 watts, but you always need to know what they're comparing it to. And so actually it varies depending on the manufacturer. So it might be they're comparing it to their old bike, it might be that they're comparing it to a previous bike. So you always need to ask that question as well. And it's a complicated topic, which is why aerodynamics can be seen to be quite frustrating, because it's often hard to know exactly how much of an effect something will have. But you should always ask the question. Right, Sino Celice. I'm 22 and I recently quit professional skiing. Because of the training I was doing, my legs are quite big and bulky, i.e. muscly. Is it a handicap in long rides with many climbs, And if yes, should I cut calories and protein to reduce muscle mass, or will I get there just by riding in time? Well, firstly, yeah, technically having really big muscles is going to be a disadvantage on long climbs, but you should also think about it in terms of the advantages that it offers as well, because cyclists look vastly different from one another. You've got super skinny people like Chris Froome, and then you've got super muscly dudes like Dylan Groenewegen or Andre Greipel, and they can all win really big bike races. So firstly, think about where your strengths are before you then start to think about trying to make your body do something that maybe it's not naturally as good at as someone who looks like Chris Froome. I also would always be really cautious about trying to cut down on calories in order to lose muscle mass, particularly because you're 22. And actually, you should probably just enjoy being super powerful rather than trying to lose loads and loads of weight. So I would definitely steer clear of that. I would do your second point, which is just keep riding, and then your body will naturally change to become more specific to your new sport. And yeah, I'm really jealous that you've got big muscly legs, because I bet you could sprint a heck of a lot faster than me. Right, next up, we've got Darren Horrocks. Since disc brakes came in, we are always hearing that X are doing this model in a disc brake version, like it isn't normal to have disc brakes. So at what point will discs become normal, and then we'll say, actually, this bike comes with a rim brake option? It's a good question, that. I reckon probably in the next couple of years. Yep, there we go. The reason I'm saying that is because this latest batch of aerodynamic bikes that have just come out this year, and by that I mean Specialized Venge, Trek Madon, Ridley, something, Cannondale System 6, all of those bikes principally have been designed around disc brakes. A couple of them do have rim brake versions as well. So I think the tide is turning. So yeah, a couple of years. Right, Eric Norgard. Why is the UCI bike weight limit not dependent on the weight of the rider? It seems that the rule favours bigger riders with a better muscle weight to total weight ratio. Well, you're right there. Emma has often voiced her frustration with the UCI minimum weight limit, given that it would be super easy for her to get a bike under that limit. There'd be zero safety concerns because she was racing at well below 50 kilos. And yeah, 6.8 kilos compared to a 50 kilo rider is vastly different to an 80 kilo rider riding a 6.8 kilo bike. I think probably the reason there is that absolute limit is simply to make it easier for the UCI to actually test, because the idea of weighing rider and bike before stage start and then performing some simple mathematics to work out whether or not they're allowed to ride that given bike is probably just a logistical minefield. So it's a broad brush answer, which is not terribly good, basically. But anyway, it is what it is. And yeah, it's probably not the worst rule that the UCI have got. Right then, what about this one from Velo Rider KM? When a rider in the peloton has to switch bikes, do they take the computer off the bike that has got the mechanical and then stick it on the new one? And yes, they do. When you are in a race and you realise that you have a puncture or you need a spare bike, there are little things that the rider needs to do in order to make sure that they get the quickest change possible and they're able to continue in the race. So if it's a rear wheel puncture, for example, you need to stick it in the 11 so the mechanic can change the wheel for you nice and fast. And if you are getting a spare bike, then it's a good idea to have this peace of mind to take your computer off, stick it on the new one, and also a water bottle as well. You need to remember to take your bottle with you. Next question, and this one gets me a little bit excited actually, because it's cyclocross. And even though it's still July, for some of us, cyclocross season is not far around the corner. So Dean Hilbers, here's the answer to your question. What tyre is the best tyre for cyclocross? Is it a tubular tyre? So the ones where the inner tube is sewn into the tyre and the whole thing is glued onto a special rim? Is it a clincher, so a normal one, or is it a tubeless tyre? Now then, if you are racing, everyone at the top end of the sport are still racing on tubular tyres, but they're a bit of a pain and they're really expensive, and so I personally wouldn't. I definitely would steer clear of clinchers because there's no point. For cyclocross, I think tubeless is the absolute way forward, because what it means is that you can run lower pressures without the risk of pinch flats. And remember, you can still pinch flat a tubular because there is still a tube inside. And you can get loads of grip because you can run those lower pressures without the risk of puncturing. And if you ride your bike, your cross bike off-road outside of racing, then that kind of robustness from your tyres is just so good. So yeah, I would definitely go for tubeless. A lot of people struggle with the idea of tubeless, but it's pretty simple as long as you know the basics, which conveniently we made a video about.
Now I mentioned sealant a little bit earlier on. I always run sealant inside my tubeless tyres. That way I get that puncture protection from sharp objects as well as pinch flats. But you have to remember that sealant has a lifespan. It will dry out inside the tyre. So from time to time, maybe every 3 or 4 months, you need to re-top up those sealant levels.
Now, having just said that tubeless is super easy, you just need to know what you're doing, there is a question here from someone that's been using tubeless for a while, and it's quite an interesting one. So Cray Ray said that he loves his tubeless setup. In one instance though, he said on his carbon wheels, he finds that the tubeless sealant feels like it glues the tyre onto the rim, and he says it doesn't happen with his alloy wheels. Now, I had a little look around and I've never heard of an instance where the sealant for tubeless tyres actually glues to the carbon rim. But what I have experienced in the past is certain carbon clinchers that are tubeless ready, the actual hook on the rim that basically sort of makes sure the tyre doesn't pop off can be quite sort of sharp, and it can really sort of hold on to the tyre quite tightly. And then when you add into the mix the sealant, you've got an amazingly secure tyre, but it will be a bit of a pain to get off. So I don't think it's glued on. I think it's possibly just because the rim is that little bit sharper. So maybe have a look at that, use your thumbs, get the tyre off, and then you might find that actually that is the reason why it's so firmly stuck. Either that, in fact, or actually the overall diameter of the inside of the rim might be just that little bit bigger on your carbon wheels than your alloy wheels, which again means that you get a super secure fit, but it's just a bit harder to get off. So anyway, have a look. Right, now completely changing the subject, over onto nutrition. Calling from Mars has asked what type of food they should be eating to stay in shape. Now, he says, knows some of it's based on what he's willing to do, but what greens or proteins do you recommend? Would artificial protein be better than milk or meat? And by artificial, I mean things like protein powder or protein bars. So I think it's fair to say that real food always beats supplements, but if you're training super hard, then supplements can be a good addition to your normal food. But I thought I would defer at this instance to a man, not Matt Stevens, the one that's just been on screen, Sir Chris Hoy, who is someone that obviously, having been a super top athlete for a long time, knows all about these basics. And so he's given us his top 5 nutrition tips.
Protein is the biggest shift, I think, in nutrition in sport in the last 10 years. All endurance athletes, now serious ones, will be looking to supplement their protein, to have some form of protein as part of their recovery. And that doesn't mean to say they're suddenly going to grow huge muscles. What it will ensure is that you can maintain lean muscle mass and also help that repair process.
That is the end of Ask GCN thing this week. If you'd like a question answered next week, then pop it in the comments section below this one, or submit it on social media with the hashtag #talkback. And then, of course, if you want it to be training specific and be in with a shot at getting it answered by one of the top coaches at Zwift, and indeed get 3 months free Zwift subscription, the hashtag is Ask GCN Training. So a little bit different, but there we go. Same questions answered. Right then, please make sure this video gets a big thumbs up before you leave it. And if you want to watch something else right now, what about the Tour de France? We have, of course, got our highlights over on Facebook, which I really hope you've checked out already, where Lloydie is analysing the stage in depth. But also, we've got videos from the race itself. So why not click on screen right now?